Too carb or not too carb? That is the question. And that is really the debate when it comes to losing weight. There is a huge push that says, well, no, you cannot eat carbs if you want to lose weight. You have to cut every single carb out of your diet in order to be slim, trim, and healthy. But then you have this other group that is saying, hey, carbs are okay. Eat the carbs, you can still lose weight. And that messaging could not be any different if you tried. Talking about a major juxtaposition. So what is the truth here? Well, to talk about carbs and fat and everything in between and losing weight, we have two women with us here today who know an awful lot about this subject. They are both experts in this. We have with us today registered dietitian Karen Smith. She is a certified diabetes educator and someone who talks extensively about this, and her partner in crime for this upcoming 12-week plant-based weight loss program, Dr. Vanita Rahman. She is also here with us today. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks, Chuck.
I'm sure that you two get this question all the time. Karen, let's start with you. How often do you work with a client who's like, yeah, I've been on these low carb diets to lose weight and I think that they're great? So how often do you get somebody coming in that wants to talk to you about carbs?
All the time. I mean, I can't even count on both hands the number of times I have that question probably in a week. Yeah, so it's a very, very popular topic.
And Dr. Rahman, this is something I believe that you and I even have talked about previously on the show. The myth about carbs and health and weight loss. Why do you think it still exists? And we're going to get to a lot of viewer questions today as well about this, but where is the message getting jumbled up here?
Yeah, I think the confusion's coming in that carbs are not really a food. They're just a source of calories. And then there are healthy carbs or healthy sources of calories. And then there are those unhealthy carbs, the unhealthy sources of calories. So it's true, we should avoid the unhealthy carbs, but we should be eating the healthy carbs. And I think that's where the confusion comes in.
Well, let's see if we can clear up some of that confusion today. And let's start with the question from Wilhelmina. Dr. Rahman, we'll start here. Is it harder to lose weight if you've regained it from a previous high-fat diet such as keto? That is a good question.
Yeah, first of all, keto diets may cause a rapid weight loss initially, but then they often invariably will just lead to regaining of the weight, and for several reasons. One, they're hard to maintain. Second, they're often loaded with high fat, low fiber foods that really have very high caloric density, so they lead to weight gain. But is it harder to lose weight if you've regained it after a keto diet? I don't think it's necessarily harder than it is with any other person, but what may be harder is it may be hard to make that transition. Going from a keto diet, one has developed a taste for very high fat, calorically dense foods, and then to go from that to, say, a whole food plant-based diet that's lower in fat, not as calorically dense, that transition can be rough. So it takes time for the taste buds to adjust, but I think people can have great success.
And Karen, you just heard Dr. Rahman say that short-term, keto diet, you cut carbs out, you could see a rapid weight loss. But why is that? What's the mechanism there that's causing the body to burn all of that fat right away?
Well, interestingly, people don't typically burn fat right away on a keto diet. So there's an amount of weight that's lost, just from making a very big diet change. And typically people do, and sometimes people do move to a healthier diet even when they are doing a keto diet. Maybe they are eating more vegetables than they were prior to doing that. So they may lose some weight initially. Burning through the carbohydrate stores in your body, the glycogen, and which is stored with water, like that also leads to some weight loss initially in the beginning. And what's interesting is that keto diets aren't shown to result in a greater amount of true, fat loss compared to other types of diets. And I think what's so appealing to people is that they can, perhaps lose a large amount of weight in the beginning, but that's not necessarily sustainable or healthy.
Gotcha. Let's continue the carb questions, shall we? Let's take a question. Oh, this is a good one. Mickey wrote in with this one. Karen, we'll go to you. Do zero-calorie sweeteners such as stevia have carbs in there, and do they also then make it harder to lose weight?
Oh, great. So if a sweetener is 0 calories, then no, they won't have carbohydrates. But what's interesting in sweeteners is that they often are even sweeter than sugar. And so our brains don't necessarily know the difference, right? Like whether we're eating sugar or whether we're eating stevia or another type of artificial sweetener. And so for many people, that taste of sweetness, triggers that release of dopamine in the brain. It can increase cravings for sugar and for other, sweet foods throughout the day that aren't necessarily fruits or other healthy foods. And another thing that research is showing is that a lot of these artificial sweeteners have negative impacts on the microbiome and gut health. And we know that the way in which we feed those bacteria in our gut can make a big difference in weight loss and disease risk.
All right, here's an interesting question from someone who has previously been on a keto diet. And Dr. Rahman, I'm going to ask you this one. This one comes to us from Heather. She wants to know flat out, how much fat do we actually need?
How much fat do we need in our food, I assume?
Yes, correct. How much should we be eating in a day?
Yeah, so, we actually have some good research from the Lifestyle Heart Trial, the research that Dr. Barnard did in patients with type 2 diabetes, in the research that came out of New Zealand, the BROAD study. And in all of these research studies, were using a low-fat plant-based diet where about 10% of the calories were coming from fat. And this is where people had terrific results. Their blood sugars dropped, their blood pressures came down, their cholesterol came down. They actually reversed heart disease. So that's the number we want to aim for, about 10% of calories from fat.
Well, she's got a follow-up as well. She wants to know then, what is the risk of eating just a little bit of saturated fat?
Yeah, so, whenever a food has fat, it has a combination of different fats, some saturated, some unsaturated. Trans fats are not naturally found in food. They're really a creation of the food industry. So naturally, foods have either saturated or unsaturated, and different foods may have different amounts of each. And what we really want is to, when we do consume fat in our food, is to opt for foods that have more unsaturated fat and less of the saturated. So it's not that we need to go 0% saturated fat. We just really want to minimize that. And generally with a plant-based diet, we will, because plants are generally low in saturated fat, with the exception of, and I hate to say this for those coconut fans out there, with the exception of coconut and chocolate, which are just naturally very high in saturated fat.
You're breaking hearts, Dr. Rahman. You are absolutely breaking hearts right now. Let's see, Karen, this is a really good question here that comes to us from Kate as we're talking about carbs here on the exam room. Kate wants to know, can carbs boost metabolism and speed up weight loss? Interesting. That seems to be really counter to the keto dieters out there.
Yeah, absolutely. The exact opposite, right? So, some research that has come out of the physicians committee has shown that switching to a low-fat plant-based diet actually boosts the amount of calories that we burn in a day, like through that digestive process. And so, yes, absolutely. And again, it depends on the type of carbs, right? Like I really think it's important that we emphasize the types of foods that people are consuming that are providing the carbohydrates, right? So we are talking specifically about whole foods, fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains. And in choosing more of those types of foods, not the processed carbohydrates, then yes, our bodies can actually burn more calories when we are choosing those types of foods.
All right, Dr. Rahman, we have time here for a couple of more questions here on the exam room. We're doing a quickie here on carbs today, just a few quick questions. This one comes to us from Melina. Oh, man, this is one of my favorites. How does the body process simple and complex carbohydrates differently? So I'm assuming she's asking, what's the difference between a sweet potato and a candy bar?
Yeah. So simple carbohydrates, what that usually means is sugar. So whether that is sugars naturally found in the food or added to the food. So a spoonful of sugar is a simple carbohydrate. A spoonful of agave or maple syrup is a simple carbohydrate. It's just sugar. Whereas complex carbohydrates refers to things that contain fiber and starch. So they may not necessarily be sweet. So for example, if we have an apple, it has a lot of fiber, it has a lot of starch, and yes, it has some simple sugar that's naturally found in it. That's what makes it sweet. On the other hand, if we have a spoonful of sugar, all we get is that sugar. We don't get any starch, we don't get any fiber. And fiber really plays a key role in our health. It has so many benefits. It helps with our gut health. It relieves constipation. It reduces the risk of cancer. It lowers our cholesterol. It lowers our blood sugar. It helps us feel full so we eat less. And it helps our gut microbes thrive. So I could just go on and on about how great fiber is. But the key difference is when we're talking about complex carbs, we're including foods that have high amounts of fiber, where simple carbs, they really don't have much fiber.
All right. Now, Karen, I know that you love this final question. When we were prepping to do this segment here, I mentioned it, and you got the biggest Cheshire cat grin across your face. So I'm going to give you this one just so you can elaborate on it. And I don't think that Gwen, who is asking this, is the only person who's wondering it. Why do I have such a hard time losing weight whenever I eat pasta?
Yeah, and I am a personal fan of pasta. And so I think it's important to look at how it is that you're preparing pasta and, what might be going on top of it and how much pasta you're consuming as well. So sometimes even when we're talking about, whole plant-based foods, which pasta is, slightly processed, it still might only contain one ingredient. But it is possible, right, to overconsume some of these foods. And sometimes we hear the opposite. So with pasta in particular, because it is made from flour, some people find themselves overeating, overconsuming it, that there's a different response to their satiety when they're eating pasta versus eating a large salad or fruits or foods that aren't processed at all. And so that might be something to consider, just like being mindful of how much of that pasta you're eating, and perhaps also looking at, well, what else is involved in that pasta meal? Are you making a sauce that perhaps has oil, or buying a sauce? If it's a prepared sauce from the grocery store, often they have oils, salt, sometimes sugar, things added to them that might make them more calorie dense. And, perhaps just looking at other ingredients that are in that pasta dish. And certainly pasta is something that can be included and enjoyed. And again, looking big picture, like what is your overall intake of food for the entire day, the entire week, and what percentage of foods that you're consuming, are fruits and vegetables and beans compared to pasta and perhaps other slightly more refined foods.
I think that you are spot on with that assessment 100%, because you think about what do people typically put on top of their pasta? You've got your spaghetti sauce or your marinara sauce, and then a whole bunch of Parmesan cheese, right? So that is going to kick up the fat. But then you also touched on the sides, and somebody goes to a restaurant like Olive Garden, man, those breadsticks are deadly. Those things are fat and calorie bombs. Have you ever looked at the nutrition facts for those things? It's amazing how many calories and how much fat is in a single breadstick, Karen.
Yeah, absolutely. And a great trick when, sitting down to a pasta meal or any meal, especially a restaurant meal for that matter, is to fill up on a salad, not necessarily the Olive Garden salad, which might be, loaded with a really high fat dressing, but starting your meal with an apple or some steamed vegetables, like starting with those the lowest calorie density foods, which are fruits and vegetables, and making them a really big percentage of your meal, right? Like if 50% of your meal, even if it includes pasta, is, fruits and or vegetables, then it is going to be difficult, to gain weight, even when you're including pasta, because you're still taking, you're choosing foods that are just very low in calorie density, and they're making up a really big percentage of your total calories.
And Dr. Rahman, last question, whole wheat pasta versus regular pasta, does it make a difference?
Yeah, it does. So whole wheat pasta is a whole grain, so it has more fiber. It'll have more nutrients. So always go with whole grain if you can. So whole wheat penne, fusilli, elbows, whatever you like. And you can taste the difference. Whole wheat pasta is also more filling. So if you're trying to lose weight, whole wheat pasta is much better because you'll see that fiber is going to fill us up quickly.
Low fat versus low carb. I'm guessing that this is something you will be talking about extensively coming up in your 12-week plant-based weight loss program, isn't it?
Absolutely. So we're going to really break down, how much fat do we need, how much carbohydrates do we need, and what are good sources of them. And then getting to Karen's point about what's going on top of that pasta. So we're actually going to do cooking demos also to show people how to put together some yummy meals.
There you go. Put it into practice right away. I love that so much. And you know what else I love? I love the fact that Karen Smith is back with us full time here at the Physicians Committee and is now available to see patients up at the Barnard Medical Center. So telemedicine visits are available. I'm going to put that info right there up on the screen. 202-527-7500 is the telephone number, or visit barnardmedical.org for a full list of states where services are available and insurance is accepted. So make your appointment today at barnardmedical.org or call 202-527-7500. Karen, if somebody comes in and they would like for you to scrutinize what it is that they're eating a day, they want to fine tune their menu and try to get as healthy as possible, that's something you can absolutely work with them on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love to help people just improve their nutrition. And I think no matter, where you're starting, there's always room for improvement.
And Dr. Rahman, to you, who is a fellow weight loss success, I know that, working with patients to get their weight under control and tackle obesity and not be, one of the 40+% of adults out there right now who are struggling with obesity, that has to be one of the most rewarding aspects of your job.
It really is, Chuck. It's amazing to see people transform their health once they start eating this way, lose the weight, and they'll often reverse their diabetes and high blood pressure. And it's just the most wonderful feeling to take them off their medications.
There you go. You see it, 202-527-7500 or barnardmedical.org to make that appointment today. Karen Smith, Dr. Vanita Rahman, thank you both so very much for being here today.
Thanks for having us, Chuck.
If your health IQ is a couple of points higher than it was a few minutes ago, go ahead and like this video or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And to take it even higher, head over to Apple Podcast or wherever you get your favorite shows. Look for The Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. Hit the subscribe button there as well and help to make your world a healthier place.